Welcome to Commander Pop Culture, a place to gather magical information with some laughs, might I add. Hello everyone, welcome to spoilers of Outlaws of Thunder Junction. They officially started today. There were some preseason spoilers. There were only like a handful of cards, so I didn't do a pre-spoiler season video. I'm just going to lump it all together. You're here for me to talk about them and hear what kind of decks you want to play them in your EDH game. As a familiar stranger, whenever you commit a crime, put a counter on it, then exile a card from a graveyard. If a creature card is exiled this way, you have Lazov become a copy of it until end turn. This ability triggers once a turn. Targeting opponents, anything they control, and/or cards in their graveyards is considered a crime. Breaking the law, breaking the law. I love that. That's hilarious. So the crime mechanic is literally in this card's ability. Oh no, wait. So you have to commit the crime first and then target the graveyard. What's interesting is, isn't this a loop? Oh, that's why they put the clause of this only triggers once a turn. Because if they didn't have that clause at the very end of this paragraph, you would have been able to exile all the creatures in all graveyards and put a ton of counters on this. If they didn't include that, this card would have probably been a mythic and be very expensive. Jolene, Plundering Pugilist. If you attack a creature, power 4 or greater, create a treasure token. What's the bummer about this is you could attack with multiple and you'd still only get one. And then for its mana sync ability, you can sack a treasure to deal damage to any target. I don't know what plot is. It's also a new mechanic. You may pay for and exile this card from your hand. Cast it as a sorcery on a later turn without paying its mana cost. If you want to get the Surveil clause, and let's say you had one other card in your hand, this kind of enables you to... Oh, it doesn't specify what turn you can cast it on. It's not like Rebound. So that's really cool, actually. You could play this in the early game when you have a full grip of cards, and then you could decide to cash in to get the bonus effect of Surveil. That's nice. Sataru the Infiltrator. It's kind of weird that we have we have a Neon Dynasty guy in a Western world. Human Ninja Rogue for Menace. Whenever it or one or more other non-token creatures enter the battlefield in control, if none of them were cast or no mana was spent to cast them, draw a card. Oh, that's kind of cool. Or you want to pair this with things like Ornithopter and Memnite. You could also play Cascade, and it lets you draw bonus cards off of cascading stuff. And I feel like there's a ton of stuff like Omniscience. If you paired this up with Omniscience, you draw your whole deck, play your whole deck. Hopefully you don't draw into a bunch of lands, because that's when the train would officially stop. But that'd be the dream setup. This with Omniscience for sure. Double down. Whenever you cast an Outlaw spell, you get to copy it. Outlaws are assassins, mercenaries, pirates, rogues, and warlocks. Those all do seem like outlaws, with the exception of warlocks. So that seems like a bit of a stretch. Ooh, Prismatic Vista's getting a full art treatment. Hell yeah. I love full arts. I don't think Prismatic has gotten a full art treatment yet, so I'm going to be picking up a copy for myself. It's Transmutation Font. Tap it to create your choice of a blood token or clue token or food token. For 3 mana, sack 3 artifact tokens with different names. Search your library for an artifact card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle. This feels like a very roundabout way of getting your tutor, but I feel like the tapping to make a token is how this card's not going to be abused. I feel like you're going to be making random tokens by some other means and then cashing them in with the bottom ability more often. But if you got nothing else better to do, you can make a random token to feed into its bottom ability later. It's not bad. I don't know what the difference of the symbol means. This one has like a vault door. This one is historically the same. It's just they bring in guest artists, and that's the set symbol. So I might have to look into this vault door symbol. I don't know what it means. Scapeshift's getting a full art treatment. I'm also interested in this. It looks pretty dope. Scapeshift is one of the best landfall cards in the game, because what you do is you tap everything down, float all your mana, sack all your lands, and then replace them. They may come in and tap, but that's why you floated all your mana. So you get all the benefits of ETB triggers, and you still get to use what was in play. And the other great part about this card is it lets you tutor for any land. So what people like to do is they like to tutor up stuff like Valakut, a bunch of mountains, and like clean up the board or kill people with it. You could also get Field of the Dead and just 6 other lands and make 7 2/2 zombies That's usually what I see with this card, but there's all kinds of crazy setups you do escape shift. You could also get Urborg and Cabal Coffers to set up future turn. All kinds of cool stuff. Oltec Matterweave. Whenever you cast a creature spell, choose one. Oh, you get a gnome or create a token that's a copy of an artifact token you control. Dang. The top ability is pretty negligible, but that bottom one is pretty strong. There's all kinds of artifact tokens that are pretty scary out there. The biggest offender that's more common is probably the ones with starred stat blocks, like the constructs that you make with Urza Saga. Making copies of those would be pretty brutal. Notion Thief getting a full art. I love the Western style. I was talking about this with some of my friends. I feel like Magic has been making so much product that it's almost feeling like a reskin of sets. You know what I mean? Like, the story almost doesn't matter. If you could see your favorite characters in a new skin, it kind of freshens the card up a bit. It's kind of like League of Legends. Now they make skins for their games, or just video games in general, and microtransactions trying to get a little bit extra money out of you. But this looks cool. It kind of reminds me of Twisted Fate a little bit, and it's this little ethereal, ghostly skin. Morbid Opportunist getting a full art treatment. If you don't know what this one does, is it lets you draw a card when something dies, and it only triggers once a turn. And I forgot to mention what Notion Thief does. It steals other people's draws. You have to be kind of careful with this because I've been killed by this. Like, I'll steal someone else's draw, and then someone will follow up with Consecrated Sphinx, and then they'll force me to draw myself to death. Because Consecrated Sphinx is a May trigger, or I steal their draw, they'll attempt to draw again, I steal it again, and when it gets to the point where it'd kill them, they just say, nope, I'm not going to draw. And the game continues on. I'll die in my next draw trigger with Notion Thief. Mystic Snake is getting a full art treatment. I kind of wish they put a cowboy hat on it and did the revolver for its rattler, kind of like in Rango.
Hello, brother. Thirsty.
That's one of my favorite animated films that have been kind of fun, but probably would have caused some serious copyright claims, and that's why they didn't dare to do it. But it's a rattler snake in the desert. Fits just fine, I guess. Desertion. Counter target spell if an artifact or creature spells counter, so I put that card under the battlefield under your control instead. I don't see this card that often, probably because it's a 5-mana counter spell, but it steals stuff. I think I own a copy of this. I don't see this being too expensive because of how little play it gets. I want my interaction to be 2 mana or less, and obviously this is significantly more. And for the off chance of stealing something good, it's hit or miss. At its worst, you counter a non-artifact or non-creature spell and you get nothing. At its slightly not as bad worst, you counter an artifact or creature that's synergistic to just that person's deck, that meaning it's not very impactful for your board. You basically want to use this on big staples if they come out. And there's only a handful of those in the game, so that also probably will influence its price point. Brazen Bower is going to full art treatment. Pretty dope looking. On its instance side, you get to return an online permanent to an owner's hand, and then on its creature side, it's a 3/1 evasive attacker. I don't see this in Commander that often. Maybe in Adventure decks they'll play this because it's one of the best, but I think 60 card formats that run Brazen Borrower will want copies of this, and that might influence its price point. Port Razor's getting a full art treatment. This gives you extra combats if it connects with a player. I like its weapon. It's like a weird gun sword. What's strange is the trigger mechanism and the lever action is on a separate handle.
Why?
That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but everything else about it looks cool. Desert's gonna reprint. This card does not see a whole lot of play. It only does 1 damage to target attacking creatures, so it has its niche places. This was the first desert to ever be printed in Magic's history, and then the following deserts that came out after were Amonkhet. I don't know if Diamond Valley and Mammoth Graveyard were errated to be deserts, but there's not a whole lot of them. Play it in your Hazazon decks or anything else that really cares about deserts. I think Hazazon is really the only one that does. Grindstone's getting a weird wanted poster printing. If you don't know what Grindstone does, target player mills 2. If 2 cards that shared a color with it were milled this way, you repeat this process. So this card combos with Painter's Servant. When Painter's Servant enters the battlefield, you name a color. Everything is now that color. Obviously, you force people to mill, and since everything's one color due to Painter's Servant, it repeats, and you combo kill someone. Dust Bowl. This needed a reprint, actually. This is a $20 card. This should impact it a little bit. For 3 mana, you could sack any land other than this one if you wanted to destroy a non-basic, so it's a repeatable effect. Path to Exile. I feel like everyone knows what this does, but if you don't, exile a target creature. The owner of that creature gets to get a basic, put in play, tap. Honest Rutstein. When it enters, return target creature from your graveyard to your hand, and then creature spells cost 1 less to cast. Holy cow. This is pretty cool for an uncommon. I'd play this in my command zone. I like the coupon for 3 mana, and then it brings something back from your graveyard to your hand. The only thing that kind of is a bummer, it's so mana efficient that having a creature to return on curve might be a little off. So it's kind of in a weird place where you want it down early for the cost reduction, but you don't because you want to get the value of its ETB trigger. I don't know. Feels a little weird. The key to the vault. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, look at that many cards from the top of your library. You may exile a non-land card from among them, put the rest in the bottom. You may cast the exile card without paying its mana cost. Well, it pairs really well with that ninja we saw earlier, and based on the damage is how deep you go into the deck. I would give it a try. Vile Smasher the Gleeful Grenadier. Whenever another outlaw enters the battlefield under your control, Vile Smasher deals 1 damage to target opponent. What sucks is you could only target one person, so dealing 120 damage or getting 120 triggers seems pretty hard. 4 mana for a worm that's a 6/5. That's pretty insane because it also has trample, and then it gives you more value should it die. You get exile from your graveyard, search for a desert, and put it in play, tap. Wow, this card seems pretty cracked. This seems like a really good 60 card format card just because the pressure is so insane, and then you get additional value from your graveyard should it die. From Violent Cacophony. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on him and draw a card. You're in the right colors. Just gotta play a lot of instants, and then you'll get your counter and your draw effect that you want. Final Showdown. It's free. Choose 1 or more additional costs. 1 white plus something. If you pay 1 colorless, all creatures lose all abilities till end of turn. For additional, choose a creature you control, it gains indestructible till end of turn, +5, destroy all creatures. Interesting modal card. Because of the order of the text, you could choose all 3 and invest 8 mana. Interesting card. Ooh, Stoneforge Mystic getting a full archery range. She looks dope. Lets you 2 for equipment, and then for 2 mana and tapping it, you get to cheat into play instead of paying the cost. What people like to do is they get their big, nasty, expensive equipment like Argentum armor or something like that, and get some value by cheating into play. Torpor Orbs getting a reprint? That's pretty good. Torpor Orb is pretty expensive. Turns off ETB triggers. Probably needed to happen a long time ago. Someday, though, I think we will get stacks pieces that cantrip off each other that does the same effect. Adding a cantrip of drawing a card makes stacks cards just slightly better. Like, some people would argue that's a bad idea, but hear me out. Because a stacks piece has a very niche effect. If you're playing against opponents who don't have ETB triggers in their hands, it's a dead card. It does nothing. So if it cantrips, though, at its very worst, if it doesn't affect anybody's hands, then it at least replaces itself. And the cards I like that do that are like Ground Seal and the Spark card from Aftermath. They need to keep doing that with stacks pieces. Hopefully we get a Torpor Orb that does that in the future. Vaultborn Tyrant for 7 mana, 6/6 with trample. When it or another creature power 4 enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life and draw a card. So it's kind of like a cracked out version of Garruk's Uprising. When it dies, if it's not a token, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types.
I'll be back.
Oh, okay. It's a gift that you have to get rid of twice. Excellent. That sounds fun to deal with. Cool little dinosaur. Oh yeah, according to this, the Thunder Junction, the Big Score, are standard legal cards. The cards with the Bank Vault are legal, actually. And then there's breaking news, and then the Commander Junction stuff. So I think the breaking news is the one with the jail cell door is not legal and standard. The Big Score is legal and standard. Special Guest is not legal and standard. Oh, Mana Drain's getting a reprint. That's pretty dope. It looks cool too. I like the color scheme here. Kind of reminds me of Counterbalance a little bit. If you don't know what this does, it's one of the best 2-mana interaction spells because it lets you counter something. And then on your next main phase, you add colorless equal that spell's mana value. Oko Thief Crowns is getting reprinted with this wanted poster. Pretty dope. Oko was a problem in his first iteration because for 3 mana, he would start off with either 6 or 5 loyalty, and it's just hard to deal with. The +1, you could either target your own stuff or someone else's stuff, and you turn an artifact or a creature into a 3/3 elf with no ability. I've seen legacy games where Oko turned their own moxes into 3/3s and beat people to death with them. That's how good Oko is or was before all the bannings happened. And then in his standard rotation, he was a menace. It was either you played him or you played things to beat it. That's how bad it was. But luckily, this is just like a fun card. It's not going to be standard legal because it has the jail cell doors. Pretty fitting to put the jail cell doors on the non-standard legal cards, like you're locking them up or something. Whoa, that looks pretty dope. Gonti Canny Inquisitor. Spells you cast don't own cost 1 less to cast. So you want to steal stuff. Whenever one or more creatures control deal damage to a player, look at the top card of the player's library. Then exile it face down. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled. It may spend mana of any type that can be spent to cast that spell. Because of the clause of dealing damage to a player, max of 3 if you have 3 creatures on board that can connect. Interesting theft card. Yuma, Proud Protector. Costs 1 less for each land card in your graveyard. Okay, that makes more sense why it has 8 cost. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you sack a land if you do draw a card. Whenever a desert is put into your graveyard for anywhere, create a 4/2 plant warrior creature token with reach. So if you're curious, the cost reduction does affect commander text. So this thing will be really hard to kill, and the fact that you make bodies and cantrip off of sacking your lands, that's pretty powerful. You get a lot of power in play real fast. You just need a helper cards to consistently get your lands back out of your graveyard. Luckily, there has been a lot recently. Like with even the last set alone, we've had the Splendid Reclamation on a creature card. We got a reprint of Splendid Reclamation, Crucible Worlds, Raminep Excavator. You got plenty of things to, undo the land production loss from sacking it. I think this guy is going to be really powerful. Stella Lee, the wild card. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, exile the top card of your library until end of your next turn. You may play that card. You can tap it to copy an instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Oh, and it does have the clause of needing 3 or more spells on the stack, so it's not a total easy combo with, say, Reiterate. The traditional thing is you have dual caster mage and something else, and you go into this loop, and you have something that gives you a payoff for casting or copying spells that does like a damage or something. But because you can't 2-card combo people, it makes this card a lot fairer, especially when you could play from the command zone. I could see why they had to make that clause of it being 3 or more spells. Interesting work around wizards. I wonder if that 3 or more is, hindering enough. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this card. This seems to be toting a very fine line. It can be really powerful, and it can also be really weak. Free Strider Lookout. Whenever you commit a crime, look at the top 5. You may put a land from among them into play tapped. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. This ability only triggers once a turn. Committing crimes on other people's turns is pretty easy at instant speed, so going 5 deep to find a land is pretty good. I think you'd consistently hit a land with that ability. Miriam the Herd Whisperer. As long as you turn mounts and vehicles you control have hexproof, whenever a mount or vehicle you control attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. If you don't know what mount is,
Means get on your horses.
it's like crew, where you have to meet like a certain power level and then you get bonus stuff with it. It should force you to attack the same thing. You can attack in different directions, even with the creature mounting it. A little missed flavor, but they probably needed to save lines of text by not including that. Jace the Reawakened. It has a passive where you can't cast it for your first, second, or third turn of the game. It's very similar to the Angel. +1, draw, discard, +1. Exile a non-land card with mana value 3 or less. It becomes plotted. -6 until end of turn. Whenever you cast a spell, copy it. Oh, the -6 is pretty scary. Just whenever you cast anything, copy it. All right. I think this has a fuller version too. Ah, that's dope. It's Ashiok. underneath. That's awesome. I wonder what the lore of that is. Gisa the Hellraiser. Ward 2, pay 2 life. In addition to the 2 mana, if someone wants to target this, they have to additionally pay 2 life. Skeleton zombies, +1/+1 menace. Whenever you commit a crime, create 2 tap 2/2 blue-black zombie rogue creatures. This ability only triggers once a turn. Hell yeah, it doesn't have decay. I think that was a big gripe with a lot of people. The last iteration of zombies we got. This seems pretty good. I feel like committing a crime is really easy in the Wild West. Rakdos the Muscle. Whenever you sack another creature, exile cards equal to its mana value from the top of your target player's library. Until your next end step, you may play those cards. And mana may be spent as any color, so it has a sack outlet on itself. It gains indestructible till its turn, but you tap it, and you can only do it once a turn. Because the sacrifice ability to activate it, it's behind the colon. So if you want to sack more than one thing, you actually can. You just sack something and you put the ability on the stack, and then before the ability can resolve, you activate it again, and then you'll have a bunch of abilities that say activate only once a turn, tap it. It seems weird that they did that. Maybe I'm reading it wrong and I don't understand the rules of Magic, but I think I'm reading it right. Let me know in the comments below if I'm interpreting this wrong. It just locks you into, if you have intentions of sacking a lot of things in one turn, you have to do it in one instance. You can't just spread it out throughout your turn or other people's turns. You have to take a committed response. Pretty powerful card. It lets you steal stuff from people's decks as well. Vraska the Silencer. Whenever a non-token creature an opponent controlled dies, you may pay 1. If you do, return that card to the battlefield tapped under your control. It's a treasure artifact and it loses all their card types. That's pretty sweet. Vraska basically turns people's dudes into your personal treasure. High body count.
She's a
Kill the Kid. Flying lifelink for 3, and it's a 3/3. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, you may cast a permanent spell with equal or lesser mana value from your hand without paying its mana cost. If you don't, you may put a land from your hand on the battlefield. Damn, this is pretty sick. I want to play this commander. At its worst, you ramp. At its best, you get to cheat stuff into play for free. That's pretty dope. You just need to fill your deck up with things that cascade or give you alternative ways of playing things other than from your hand. You also want to keep your hand full to take advantage of its cast trigger. Yeah. I've always been looking for something that does this kind of effect. This seems like the perfect commander for that archetype I've always wanted to try. It's getting a wanted poster version. Okay, not bad. Any Flash the Veteran. 5 mana for a 4/5 with Flash. Has to have Flash when it has Flash in its name. On ETB, if you cast it, return a target permanent mana 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Whenever it becomes tapped, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those this turn. Oh yeah, that's pretty cool. It's card advantage and its recovery, and it doesn't have the same suffering effects that Rutstein does, because this can target any permanent including your fetch lands, and it's high enough cost where you won't miss any value on its ETB trigger. Tiny Bones joins up. On ETB, any number of target players each discard a card. Whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield under control, any number of target players each mill a card and you lose 1 life. All right, that's kind of cool. It says target players, so you can elect to not target yourself, but if you are playing a Madness deck, you could take advantage of the discard trigger if you wanted to. Has more applications and more decks outside of just mill if you wanted to. The Great Train Heist has free. For 3 additional mana, untap all creatures controlled. There is additional combat, plus 2 more mana. Creatures you control get +1/+0 to first strike till end of turn. For 1 mana, choose an opponent. Whenever a creature control deals damage to that player this turn, create a tapped treasure token. Whoa. Because it's an instant, I could see people playing it just for the treasure tokens, and that's a pretty good low floor. It's ceiling, you get additional combat and you can kill people. So this is a very efficient card and very flexible. I can see this being pretty expensive. Even at a rare, it's a really good card. This is actually better than I thought. Because it's an instant, interact with someone else's board wipe and make everything else loose indestructible. So it's a god killer. This will be more expensive because it's a mythic. Gitrog, the Ravenous Ride. We saw this on the Magic the Gathering website. Trample and Haste. When it deals combat damage with a player, you may sack a creature that's saddled at this turn. If you do, draw X cards and put up to X land cards from your hand on the battlefield tap, where X is a sacrifice creature's power. Interesting thing, though, is you could saddle beyond 1 if you desire. I don't know what reason you'd have to saddle this multiple times, but you could. Slick Shot Show Off. Flying in haste. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it gets +2/+0 till end of turn. So it's like a more cracked out version than Prowess, and it has plot. I think in the late game, this thing's pretty scary. Get a surprise kill if you have enough spells to follow up after this. And you can telegraph your turn and save mana. So like you plot it the following turn, you play it for no mana, and then you have a ton of mana at your disposal to get this thing really big and crack someone with it, maybe to death. Olivia, the Opulent Outlaw. Flying lifelink. Whenever one or more outlaws you control deal damage to a player, make a treasure. For 3, you get to sack 2 treasures. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. That's kind of a steep price. You have to pay 3 mana and then you sack 2 treasures, which could normally be used for mana. So it's like you're wasting 5 mana for a slightly better Gavnia Township ability. Of the commander cards, this is probably the weakest one, unfortunately. I really like the desert one. Magda, the Horde Master. Whenever you commit a crime, create treasure, triggers once a turn. Sack 3 treasures, you create a 4/4 red Scorpion Dragon. The hell? Activate only has a sorcery. It also has haste. Well, just take 2 unlikely creature types and jam them all together and you get a Scorpion Dragon. Selvala, Eager Trailblazer for 4 mana. It's a 4/5 with Vigilance. Whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 red Merc. Has the same ability to tap it to give a creature +1/+1. The Mercs seem like a more fair version of Exalted because they'll have Summoning Sickness. And then you could tap it to choose a color. Add 1 mana of that color for each different powers among creatures you control. You could add a ton of mana if you have varying power levels in the same color. Vraska joins up. So I'm guessing there's going to be a joins up for multiple colors with different names on them. Enters the battlefield, put a death touch counter on a creature on each creature control. That's pretty relevant. Whenever a legendary creature you control deals damage to a player, draw a card. Damn. Historic decks will love this. It's also legendary. I think for the draw trigger alone, and for how cheap it is, this is pretty amazing. I would also love to play this in my Niv Mizzet deck that I just featured today on the channel. It'll probably be out of budget, but fun card to consider if you're not building on a budget. Fortune.
My loyal steed.
Enters, you get a Scry 2. Whenever attacks while saddled, till out of combat, exile it, and up to 1 creature that's saddled this turn, return those to the battlefield. So it's a flicker effect. You'll get repeated value out of this. Pretty good enabler. Sorcery Spree. It's a 3 mana tutor, or for 3 mana, have target player draw 3 cards and lose 3 life. And you can also do both. The rate is pretty good. If you want to draw cards, you're getting a card per mana investment. You just have to be in heavy black to do that. The tutoring is much easier. I wonder why they made the draw effect triple black, because it's significantly weaker than tutoring your library for any card. I think most people would rather have that. So like you'll get to put this in multicolored decks and it's not a feel bad because you'll get the most powerful effect in Magic of tutoring your library. The fast lands are coming back and we're getting full art treatments. I think it's pronounced canal. Yeah, it is. I think I have this version. I guess it's more easily accessible than this one because this is like the random insert in that Doctor Who set. And it looks a lot cooler in my opinion. Inspiring Vantage. Are they all the train? This one looks exactly the same. Instead of going over a crick, it's just, I guess, outlaws trying to steal something. All right. Is this like a panorama? I think it is. Oh, that's not bad. I was going to complain that it's all the same, but if it's a panorama where you could stack them all side by side and you see the full length of the train, I could get behind that. That's pretty cool. This is the front of the train. Speaking of trains, I'm 31 years old. I didn't know what the caboose of a train was until I was like 26. A funny story, gaming with my buddies, they were asking me to go to the caboose of the train and I was going to the front and they're like, that's not the caboose, man, that's the caboose at the back end. Have you ever heard of people referring to, your ass as the caboose? I'm like,
and shake your caboose, and shake your caboose.
oh yeah, that makes way more sense. Had my blonde moment. Hope you all enjoyed that story. God, what's wild is this train is so goddamn long that it goes over multiple different terrain types. It's like the
The Citadel of Rick's story train comes with car after car of enemies, lovers, and Goombie.
Duelist of the Mind. This is one of the pre-season spoiler cards. Flying Vigilance power is equal to the number of cards you draw on that turn. Whenever you commit a crime, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. It only triggers once a turn. People love Little J's card. I imagine people will like this for the same reasons. I like that as Vigilance, so you can play it aggressively, and then its big butt can stuff out a lot of aggro in the early game. Definitely a 60 card format kind of card, but not bad in Commander as well. Hell to Pay.
Hell's coming with me, you hear?
Red and X does X damage to your creature. Create number of tapped treasures equal to the amount of excess damage dealt to a creature this way. So you're basically just stockpiling mana. Cool if you got nothing else better to do that turn. Thoughtseize is getting a reprint. Lets you steal a card from someone's hand. It's one of the best because it only costs 1 mana and it's any card. Crime and Punishment's getting a reprint. This used to be pretty expensive because of how few times it's been reprinted. And it actually has a pretty uniquely strong effect. Lets you destroy each artifact, creature, and enchantment with mana value X. It's not X or less, so you have to be pretty careful about that. And then it's 5 crime side. It lets you put target creature or enchantment from an opponent's graveyard under your control. Nice and flexible. Nexus of Becoming. At the beginning of your combat on your turn, draw a card. Then you may exile an artifact or creature card from your hand. If you do, create a token that's a copy of it. Except it's a 3/3 golem, so it lets you cheat in artifacts or creatures by making a 3/3 instead. You could circumvent a fair amount of mana if you're playing big, expensive artifact stuff. Oko the Ringleader, getting a wanted poster and a borderless version. I am a sucker for borderless stuff. I like color. This has color in it. It's just kind of like washed out, like it's been bleached in the sun. I prefer this a little bit more. At the beginning of combat on your turn, Oko the Ringleader becomes a copy of one target creature you control, except it has hexproof. Post 1, draw 2 cards. Commit a crime this turn, discard a card. Otherwise, discard 2 cards. Oh god. -1, create an elk. -5, for each other non-land permanent you control, create a token that's a copy of that permanent. Oh, that's pretty fun. 3 turns, you could double up your permanents that aren't lands. I also like that he becomes a creature too. Something you should do though is you have to activate this main phase 1 or play this main phase 2, because if you play it on main phase 1, if you don't activate the ability, he becomes a creature, and then he has summoning sickness, and then you won't be able to activate these abilities.
Don't blow it.
So be careful when playing this card. I could see people making mistakes. Definitely a little bit of you need a little education to play it kind of cards. Tiny Bone's a pickpocket. It steals stuff from other people, and it kind of makes people not want to block it because it has Death Touch. It also fits the themes of the set that we've seen so far, where you want to be casting stuff from places other than your hand. Pretty nice. Sword of Wealth and Power. This got a full art treatment. Gets +2/+2 and protection from instants and sorceries. That's pretty relevant because most removal is instant and sorceries. Whenever a quick creature deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Most of the swords in the game make it hard for stuff to block it, but since it doesn't do that, getting this combat trigger might be pretty hard to do. I think this card is worse than people think it will be. I think people look at it and they're like, oh, shiny new sword, exciting. But I think this will be one of the weakest ones we've gotten because it doesn't provide evasion for that damage trigger. When you do connect, the effect is really powerful. So maybe it's a balancing act. I think if they did include that, this card could be too strong. So I think they made it so balanced that they made it almost worthless to play, unfortunately. Let me know in the comments how you feel about that card as well. Build with the Lost on the Range. Ward 2, you may look at the top card of your library at any time. The top card of your library has plot. The plot is equal to its mana cost. You may plot non-land cards from the top of your library. This guy's really sweet. This is like strictly better than the reality chip, because the reality chip made you have it reconstructed for you to get the effect that you want of casting stuff from the top of your library. It's a delayed future sight effect without any extra hoops to jump through, and it protects itself with Ward 2. Also really lends itself to casting stuff from other than your hand if you're looking for those triggers. And that brings us to the end of today's Outlaws of Thunder Junction spoilers. I hope you enjoyed. If you stayed this long, clearly you enjoyed what you saw. I'm doing a video every day to cover the entire set. I also do plenty of stuff other than talk about spoilers. I do gameplay, which I am doing pretty frequently, not as frequently as I used to. I also do deck techs for new commanders that seem interesting. And then today I'm also going to do my first box opening that a subscriber sent to me. So plenty of content just for today. I've never made 3 videos in one night, but I'm going to try to. So everyone take care. Have a great one. Bye.